president announced this martial law very late. It's in the middle of the night over there in South Korea right now. The intent to quash dissent, but the images we're seeing coming out of South Korea is not that. You are seeing an escalatory, tense situation there outside of the government building. I want to go to Mike Valerio to bring us there on the scene with what is unfolding, Mike.
Well, Rahel, we now have this ban, this declaration of martial law that has been overturned by Parliament. Will Ripley, our colleague in Taipei, was just saying it should take a simple majority of Parliament to overturn this, and that has happened within the past 2 to 3 minutes. Applause breaking out in the National Assembly. We're headed there now, but certainly a feeling of palpable apprehension of demonstrators trying to get to the National Assembly. We're seeing members of the military, law enforcement in their green camouflaged helmets and uniforms. And we had reports that these members of law enforcement were trying to stop members of the National Assembly from coming into the building to overturn this declaration of martial law. But enough members managed to get in. Again, 1:06 a.m. here in Seoul, and members of the National Assembly have overturned martial law in South Korea minutes ago. So now the question is, what does South Korea's president do now that lawmakers have overturned martial law in South Korea across the country? He did this as a way to reclaim power. He is a very weak president. His approval ratings hovering in the upper 20%. Conservative figure known in this country for decades as a strong prosecutor, as somebody who has taken a strong stance against North Korea and aggression coming from north of the DMZ. And he did this, as far as we can tell, because there have been unending calls to impeach him, to remove him from office. And he said in an address to the nation a few hours ago that this was his way of strengthening control of government, which he said has been paralyzed by these calls for his impeachment and calls to impeach other members of the government, heads of ministries that he installed as well. So the question is, how does the president respond? How does law enforcement and members of the military respond? I can tell you that we have early reports of law enforcement starting to pull back from the building, and you can see on the screen more and more people getting into the National Assembly. So we're going to see if this holds. But again, in a dramatic tableau, lawmakers in Seoul just voted to overturn martial law with applause ringing out throughout the building.
Really remarkable how quickly all of this is unfolding. Mike, my understanding is you were there. You're on the phone with us. Just help us understand what's happening there right now outside of that building. Right. Obviously, we see the video, but you're able to see the full picture. So bring us there.
Yeah, we're on our way there. We're in our bureau in the center of the city because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to have a signal, if it was safe for us to broadcast. But, you know, the center of gravity of what is happening is at the National Assembly building. But I can tell you, throughout the streets, where we are in the center of Seoul right now, and as you move throughout the city, there are police officers on the phone who are wondering what is going on, who are calling their captains. You can overhear them in Korean saying, what are we doing? What is happening right now? There are people who are leaving bars, who are leaving restaurants, calling their moms, calling their dads, calling their children, saying, I'm coming home right now. This has not happened within the 21st century, a declaration of martial law, something that remains in memories of people from the 1980s when South Korea was still under a military dictatorship. So people are bracing for what the president, Yoon Suk Yeol, could do now and what orders he will give the military and law enforcement, and will they be heeded? Will those orders be heeded now that the government, the parliament, the National Assembly has voted to overturn the president's declaration that he is in charge? Martial law reigns. Anybody can be arrested without a warrant. That has just been overturned minutes ago.
The question, as you point out, though, is the practical effect, right? Will the president comply with this? And Will Ripley, I want to go back to you because that is a key question now. The impact that this vote there in Parliament, this overnight vote, will have on the martial law declaration. As far as I know, we haven't heard from the president again.
Essentially, this boils down to how much support President Yoon has from the military itself, and would the military honor this vote in Parliament where people had to wrangle themselves into the building. But as far as we know at this point, there were no shots fired. This was not something that turned into what could have been an absolutely brutal and horrific moment for this democracy, a life-altering moment for this democracy. But that hasn't happened. They pushed their way to the building, they voted, and now they've overturned it. So does President Yoon have the support of the military to try to keep this thing going? But again, keeping in mind just how deeply unpopular he is, there's been the perception by some in South Korea that he's used this North Korean issue, even issuing nationwide alerts that people felt were gratuitous for things like a North Korean, missile launch test, to try to scare people, to try to rally people behind his agenda, a deeply unpopular agenda that is being essentially stomped out at every opportunity by the opposition in Parliament. And he's grown so frustrated, apparently so paranoid, thinking that North Korean agents have somehow infiltrated the South Korean Parliament and are acting through his opposition to try to undermine his agenda. But the fact that he would surprise even members of his inner circle with this, and to make this announcement in an unexpected way, declare martial law, throw his nation into chaos, at a time where there is already so much uncertainty in the world, it raises a lot of questions about his mindset at this moment, what he's thinking, what is his plan B now that this has been overturned? Had he thought about this? And these are all questions that we don't know the answer to. We have to literally sit back and watch this completely unexpected, out of left field curveball that has been thrown our way in South Korea. Of all the things happening and brewing in the world, the story I was working on all day about North Korea and what's going on with them and with Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, definitely didn't expect, Pamela, to be here talking with you about this tonight after midnight here in Taipei.
And I certainly didn't expect to be leading the show with this. And it is the ultimate curveball. And we were just talking about this, MJ Lee, just what a shock this is for our viewers just turning in. Look, this is a vibrant democracy in South Korea. This is the first time a president of South Korea has declared martial law in the democratic era. Now the parliament voted to overturn that. But it is an extraordinary move, and it's something that Americans should be paying attention to. What is President Biden saying right now?
Yeah, as we were discussing before, when I saw these headlines coming into my inbox, I was completely stunned. I mean, it is so extraordinary what we have seen over the last few hours in South Korea. As you pointed out, martial law has not existed in South Korea since the 1980s. I was born there in the very last year that there was a military dictatorship in the country, right before there was the first democratic presidential election that elected Roh Tae-woo at the time. I think Mike was making this point before. For people in my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation, the kinds of scenes we are seeing and the headlines that we are talking about, that is not history for them. They lived through these moments and moments of upheaval and violence when they were growing up. So I cannot imagine how shocking this must be for the folks actually in the country. And to have this come out in an unplanned address practically in the middle of the night, none of this was expected. As for the reaction from here in Washington, obviously the president is not here. President Biden is traveling in Angola right now. We have heard basically nothing from the president himself so far. All we have right now is a statement, actually just a sentence from a National Security Council spokesperson saying the administration is in contact with the ROK government and is monitoring the situation closely. I've asked the White House, well, at some point, are we going to hear from the president? Are we going to get a sense of what his reaction is to this so that we have a better sense of what position the United States government is going to take as all of these scenes are unfolding? And I do think we should talk about the Biden-Yoon relationship and the U.S.-South Korea relationship. This is a president, as you know, who has made real efforts to build up and foster and strengthen the U.S.'s alliances with countries like South Korea and Japan. In 2022, when he made his first trip as president to Asia, he visited Korea and Japan. Last year, you might recall that he hosted Yoon Suk Yeol for a state visit at the White House, really rolling out the red carpet for this president, this South Korean president that just did something so unprecedented. You would think this would be a good moment for the president and this administration to really weigh in. So far, nothing yet.